Crohn's disease signs and symptoms. How do you know if you have Crohn's disease? Maybe you are stuck in the diagnosis process and you're kind of infuriated by your GI doctor because he can't figure out what you have, or maybe you're just stuck at home and you're thinking about going to the doctor and you think you might have Crohn's disease. So why should you listen to me? I actually read the book by the guy who discovered Crohn's disease, Dr. Burrill Crohn. And guess what? He did not want to call it Crohn's disease because it's stupid and confusing. He writes in his diary, the stupid GI doctor communities, they insisted on calling it Crohn's disease, and I told them not to. I begged them not to, but they did it anyway, and that is why it is such a mess today. What did Dr. Crohn's call Crohn's disease? What did he want to call it? It's the title of this book. It is called regional ileitis. What does that mean? The ileitis. He wanted to call, label the disease what we've been doing for thousands of years since Greek and Latin times. It's this: what part of the body is inflamed. So this means that the ileum is inflamed and it's regional. Where's the ileum? The ileum is the second part of the small intestine. So I've drawn it out here. It doesn't look like this. It's all wrangled up in here, but I've kind of stretched everything out like we got William Wallace on the table for us, being a good cadaver for us. And so the ileum is the second part of the small intestine. Most people who get diagnosed with Crohn's disease, they have inflammation where the ileum, where the small intestine and the large intestine meet. So around here. So what he was trying to describe, this regional ileitis, that there's going to be patches of inflammation throughout the second part of the small intestine. Now, what does the word ileum mean? It stems from Greek, and it means to be twisted up. So to help you remember that, it's like twisted up inside of us up in here. What the word Crohn's disease means today is inflammation anywhere from mouth to butthole, but we really don't use that term. Why? I don't know. GI doctors don't have a brain, to be quite frank. So really quickly, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the different parts of the digestive system. So we got first up here, the esophagus. Then we have the stomach. Then we have the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. And duodenum means 12 fingers. It's 12 finger widths in length to kind of help you remember, and it's right after the stomach. Then we have the duodenum, which it means fasting in Latin. So when they found somebody dead, this part of the small intestine is usually empty, so they called it fasting. I know, kind of weird. Then we have the ileum, which means twisted up in Greek. And then we have the colon, the last part, and that's usually really easy to diagnose, colitis, ulcerative colitis, because you just stick a camera up there and you can easily see it. So when someone has Crohn's disease, so when I was getting my colonoscopy, they shoved that camera up my butt, right? So they shoved this camera up my butt, and there wasn't much inflammation there. There was a little bit, but not much. And then they got to here, and they couldn't shove this camera up my ileum because they said it was so inflamed. So it's kind of tricky to get into this part of the small intestine. It's very easy to diagnose ulcerative colitis. You look at this in a camera. Is it inflamed? All right, we're going to call it colitis. All right, is it inflamed and bleeding? All right, we're going to call it ulcerative colitis. Done. Very easy. But with Crohn's disease, when someone's getting abdominal pain and all these nasty things, how do we see the inflammation in this part of the small intestine? So what they had me do was an MRI. They had me do an MRI, and they were able to see this with, I couldn't see. I looked at my MRIs and I was like, but, they have to have like some specialist with years of training to read these special imaging machines. So getting an MRI of the small intestine is a good way to see this inflammation, to see whether it's in the small intestine. Crohn's disease is supposed to be reserved for inflammation in the small intestine. Even though they say it's inflammation of the whole entire digestive tract, they rarely ever use that term. One thing I also had was a perianal fistula. Why that gets associated with Crohn's disease, I don't know. My answer is GI doctors are idiots and their profession's a joke, and they need to shape up. But yeah, that's a whole separate issue. You know, we have hemorrhoids and anal fissures can get associated with Crohn's disease. This whole idea of Crohn's disease is just stupid. What we're failing to recognize here is that all of this stuff right here is controlled by something. Can you take a guess at what it is? It's our brain. Our brain controls our whole entire digestive system. And now this other book right here called The Human Colon, they were working with people who had colitis because it was easy to see back then. But their colitis was so bad, their intestines were hanging out of them, right? So they could do experiments on them and see how their intestines would react. And it turns out stress was causing their gut to go into overdrive and cause their symptoms. So they would sit this person out on the table, right? And they could see, guys, the colon and the intestines are pretty much made up of the same type of tissue. They're almost the same thing. So they would put these people out on the table, right? And like this part of the colon would be exposed. And then they would start talking about nice things. They would go, hey, you play sports? Oh, I guess you don't play sports. Your colon's hanging out of you. What's your favorite TV show? Oh, I love this TV show. Oh, I love that TV show. The colon would look normal. It would look pink. The intestinal muscles would flex normally. And then they would say, hey, tell me about your sister-in-law. And then the guy would go, I hate her. All she does is she makes dishes and she doesn't clean up after herself. You know, she's bossing my brother around and sleeping behind his back, and she takes up my room, my old room. She's living in that room, and she's like, that's my space. I hate her. I can't stand her. And the more he got worked up and the more he started to talk about his sister-in-law, this started to become red. It would go from pink to red. And the intestinal muscles would start to freak. They would start to go like this. And before you know it, the guy was having bloody diarrhea. Now, talking to this person, and then they often see this, multiple times, like, hey, tell me about what's stressing you out. Tell me about the stress that's causing your Crohn's. The first thing the person's going to say, I'm not stressed out. I said it myself too. Oh, I'm not stressed out. And I'd actually start yelling and screaming at the person like a crazy person. I had crazy, insane anger and rage issues, especially towards my GI doctor because he can't do his job. So somebody just had their phone on in their room. And in the past, when I did not have my anger issues under control, I would have yelled at this person and got super angry and resented them for days and then crapped my pants in the process. But now I see how I've shifted my perspective on this, and I like literally I would just go like right on camera. Your brain controls your body. Your brain controls your butthole. Your brain controls your intestines. It is that simple. It is caused by a certain type of stress. It is repressed. And now if you are suffering from lots of diarrhea, all right, we're finally getting to the symptoms. Thank God, Mike. All right, so what are the symptoms of Crohn's disease? So the first and most popular one, and the one that I probably dealt with the most, was diarrhea. There is constipation. There's blood in the stool. There's mucus. There is fistulas. There's hemorrhoids. There is fissures. These are all in the butthole. And then there's abdominal pain. There's just pain and cramping. Now, fistulas and hemorrhoids, they are completely unrelated with the small intestine. So I'm going to talk about those in a different video. They're actually quite different. So what these people saw, what these doctors saw, who had the peoples with their colon hanging out of them, these people would have diarrhea if the way that they dealt with the stress had a more of an anger, frustration, resentment tone. And it also had this flavor of like, I can't get angry with this person, otherwise it's going to hit me back in the face. So for me, my Nintendo was constantly taken away from me when I was little, and I would get so angry when my parents would take away my Nintendo, but I couldn't show it, and I couldn't fight back, because otherwise they would just take my Nintendo away for longer. The people would have constipation when the stress was hopeless and they were depressed. So let's say my Nintendo was taken away and then my parents stomped it and then threw it in the river, and they got rid of all the TVs in the house, and then they like locked me in a dungeon or something. I know, very sicko stuff, but I would be hopeless and depressed at some point because on some level I was just so hopeless I was never going to get my video games back. Now, during the conflict active phase, while my video games have been taken away from me, the gut is going to develop extra gut cells to help us digest and absorb this hard to digest thing in our life. And I know that sounds crazy, but go look on your lab reports. There is going to be thickening of the intestinal walls. Oh my God, why is it thicker? I don't know. There's going to be polyps, growths. The purpose of this is to help you create more digestive juices to break down this hard to digest thing in your life. And to prove this to be true, there's one doctor, his name was Dr. Hammer. He took these extra gut cells and he tested them versus normal gut cells, and the extra gut cells, these specialized gut cells here, they digested the food 10 times faster. And then these flat growths serve the purpose of helping us absorb this hard to digest thing in our life. Now, when the conflict gets resolved and I get my video games back, the body goes, the brain goes, I don't need these extra gut cells anymore, and it starts to get rid of them. We're removing physical flesh from the body, and we start to get those painful symptoms. We start to get blood in the stool. We start to get mucus in the stool. We start to get the pain, and we start to get the cramping. And usually that just, for a lot of people, that just happens. So, for example, one guy I was talking to, he was in a stressful relationship. He got the person out of their house, and then the gut pain started. He couldn't digest his girlfriend. He finally got his girlfriend out of the house, and then the gut pain started because he was developing extra gut cells. Then he got rid of her. We don't need these extra gut cells anymore, and now we're getting rid of them. And so he started to freak out. He's like, oh my God, my gut hurts so bad. I don't know what I did. What did I eat? Da-da-da-da-da. And I said, hey, calm right down. What was something stressful that happened in your life? And he goes, oh my God, I just broke up with my girlfriend. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare, but now she's gone. And I said, great. Don't do any, just rest and relax. When these extra gut cells, I knew he wasn't going to be stressed out about the relationship afterwards. A lot of people, when they break up with their girlfriend, I'm guilty of this. One of my biggest flares was after a breakup. They're like, oh my God, no one's ever going to love me again. Oh, they mope and groan about it for years and years and years and years. And that's when this process of cell proliferation and cell removal just yo-yos back and forth for years and years and years. But for my friend, he was just so ready to move on, and for his gut hurt for a week, and after that he was fine. He didn't change his diet, didn't do anything. He was great. Still doing great. But for me, with my video games, from elementary school to middle school to high school, even into college, I was constantly in my video games were being taken away from me, just back and forth. I was always stressed out about how I could get more video games and what I needed to do to please my parents so I could actually play video games. And this type of behavior just got me to see the world as like this horrible place where everything made me angry and frustrated. Got a stoplight. The city planners in this city, they suck. Why can't they design a good city so I can get home faster and play more video games? Like, that was the type of insanity I was dealing with. That is the type of things that's what's going on. I know this is not the main narrative of what is causing Crohn's disease, but guess what? The main narrative has a very poor success rate when it comes to helping people with Crohn's and colitis. Everyone I talk to, there's some sort of stress in their life that's causing their Crohn's and colitis. Now, if you want a more in-depth guide on what I did to get rid of my Crohn's and colitis, I have something called the 4-step Mike method with a 13-day protocol where each day we do exercises to rewire our brain to deal with the stressful situation that we're still haunted by, to turn off our gut from going into overdrive, multiple times a day, 20 times a day, 30, 40 times a day for some of you guys. So go down below and watch that presentation to turn off your Crohn's in your mind.